good morning or good afternoon or wherever you are. And welcome on this Areopa webinar. I'm Verbeek, I'm your host and leading this webinar. And today on an already 170 Areopa webinar, which is a huge number already, we have Tonya. I'm really excited to have Tonya on this one about the Excel report layouts. Really interesting subject. So we discussed a little bit on how moving from RDLC to Excel, and that's also what we see in the Microsoft Business Central team. So yeah, really looking forward for this webinar. Some housekeeping rules. Your mic is muted. If you have any questions, you can post them in the question window. And I've spoken to Tonya, and we agreed that if there are in the chapters some questions on it, I will ask that one. So in between the steps. And indeed, I will pick up the questions. This webinar indeed will be recorded. If you want to look back, it's published on the RL webinar YouTube channel. So every webinar will be posted. So please subscribe to that channel to receive all the notifications if there is something new. If you want to be what's next, you can subscribe to the Areopa webinar. Here is the link for it. So now and then you get an update on what will next, what are the next topics. And already we have some quite interesting upcoming webinars. Christian Lenz will be on the 9th of February talking about chaos to clarity. Then Hendrik Helgesen and Stephen Maron from Untitled. If you can't make it fast, make it feel fast. I was attending that session on direction, so really interesting one. Next, on the March 23, Jeremy will talk about from AI novice to agentic thinking for the CL brain. Also quite interesting topic. Then in April 20th, Tobias and Marcus will tell about GitOps and why should you care. And I think that is run displayed probably the 26th of April. Not sure, need to refresh that and talk to Luke. Nabil will talk about learning AI the way I learned NAV. If you have an interesting topic or you are known a topic, or you can suggest a topic or looking for it, please suggest one. Or if you want to present, very please, you can also always contact us in that case. And then the last slide for handing over to Tonya. Thanks to our sponsor for having this and hosting it for NAV. So thanks for all. And Tonya, it's back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bert. Let's see, show my screen.
Yeah, I see your screen.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for attending. Today we're going to be talking about Excel report layouts from the basics to refreshable real-time reporting. My name is Tonya Bricco-Meske. I have been doing nav/BC development since 2016, so just almost about 10 years now, which is pretty crazy to think about. I've always been pretty passionate about reporting. So when the Excel reporting came out, I dove head in and started trying to figure out how can we use Excel reports and make it a little bit easier for not only developers, but our customers as well to use different types of layouts. So a little bit more about me and my reporting background. I do have an associate's degree in data analytics. So I kind of had this background of reporting and, seeing different types of tools. And, when you're exposed to different tooling, what's out there, what works well, and seeing Excel reports and Power Query is very exciting to have different options of how do we get data outside of Business Central. I am also a certified Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central developer. I work remotely in central Wisconsin in the United States. I'm also currently a manager at RSM on the application development team, and I have a blog called bcdevnotebook.com where you can see my cats. This is Rogan and Ajax. So just kind of things that I've been working on throughout my time with Business Central. And I've also been a MVP now for about 2 years. So that's just a little bit about me. So when we look at reporting in Business Central, I think we're all kind of used to, the standard, here's a report, it's displaying data. Like, yeah, this is nice to look at because it's shaded. It gives you, I guess an easy way to see things. But what if you were able to look at it in a more user-friendly consumables format? So in Excel, this is the same data. It's just presented in a different way. You're able to slice and dice with the different filters, and then also just, get down to the exact data that you need to find. So how do we do that? Today, we're going to look at some different scenarios where Excel reports can make a difference in your business processes. We will go through the 4 easy steps of creating your own Excel report layouts, and then how do we maximize our data presentation within Excel. So our agenda will be, why should I be using Excel report layouts? What are some real use cases? And then how do I begin building my own Excel reports? So to start off, let's talk a little bit about the goals of Excel report layouts. Excel report layouts use the built-in functionality of Business Central. So being able to not only leverage data sets that already exist in Business Central, but we can easily run them from BC. There's not, like any sort of add-on that you really need to have. It's simple and easy to use. So Excel reports don't require any coding experience. So everything that I'm kind of going through today, I didn't have to write any custom code. I think that's the beauty of Excel reports, is it's all like out of the box. Where Excel reports then, I think, take it to the next level is when you have your custom data sets maybe, or maybe when you were talking about refreshable reports and having some of that custom APIs, that's where Excel reports get really interesting, but there is no like customization that you need to get this working out of the box. Another goal of using Excel report layouts is having that strong data analytical capabilities. So I think where we've kind of been limited with reporting in the past is your data is presented to you kind of in that like flat file when it's delivered to an RDLC or a Word report. When we give the data over to Excel, we're able to use pivot tables, we're able to use really the whole, experience of working with Excel and working with our data. So a lot of different functions, a lot of those advanced reporting capabilities are now available within Excel. And like I said, there's no extra add-on tool that you really need to worry about purchasing or configuring because it's Excel. And then really just driving into that data-driven reporting experience. So why should we be using Excel report layouts? They are interactive reports, so it's not just that static data set that we're used to. We're able to change or like manipulate the data that's being displayed. We are also able to, slice and dice like I was talking about before. The other thing with Excel report layouts is they're not necessarily designed to be printed. While they can be printed, you're able to leverage then maybe like a lot more of your screen real estate. You're able to kind of change the way that things look and feel. They can serve multiple different purposes, so filtering, sorting, slicers, pivot tables, charts, doing a bunch of different calculations all at the same time based on one data set is really exciting. And then being able to use the built-in advanced Excel features to do post-processing on the data. A few more things about why we should use Excel layouts is you can actually mix and match your data from multiple sources using Power Query. So this is kind of that refreshable Excel reports experience that we'll dive into a little bit later in the presentation, where you can not only pull data from Business Central, but maybe you have, data in another database or another, maybe it's a data lake or something like that, where you're pulling data from multiple sources and you're able to combine it in one experience within Excel. We can also collaborate within the Office 365 suite. So as we're using Excel, maybe it's stored in SharePoint, so you can collaborate in real time with other coworkers on an Excel report. It's easy to share. It's easy to maintain. So just being able to leverage kind of that whole Microsoft experience. And then I think the biggest thing about Excel reports is it enables the end user to be involved in their layout creation and maintenance. So it's not so much developer heavy. It's not so much, reaching out to your partner and asking them to do development for you. As the end user, you can, change the way that data is displayed, especially if you have that whole data layer available, adding more sheets to Excel to maybe there's, an executive view, maybe there's a view for the people who are working on the shop floor or dealing with the data on a day-to-day basis, thinking about all the different use cases and how different roles consume their data. So when we talk about, what gives people a feeling of power, there's obviously money, maybe your status, but using shortcuts in Excel, I think everybody can say that it gives them, feelings of power, understanding how do I use Excel? How do I use all the different functionality that's available? So even, when we're working with Excel, I thought this was a pretty funny meme talking about, is that a date? And then 5739 is very much not a date. And so then, Excel is always trying to guess what are you doing with this data? And it might not be formatted exactly correctly. So that's where we come in and we make some changes to format our data. But I think everyone in this day and age has some Excel background experience. So it's an easy place to get people involved with working with their data. And then obviously the first rule of working with Excel is don't tell anyone at work that you're good at it, because you're automatically going to be the go-to person with all the Excel questions, which may not be a bad thing. But so let's look at some Excel reports in the wild. So these are just a couple ideas of how we have built Excel reports to help our customers, get the data that they need and be able to work with it. So this first example is the physical inventory count. So the physical inventory list is a report out of the box in Business Central. So what we did is we checked the options to show the quantity calculated in item tracking numbers. And then we sent this to Excel and built out this Excel layout. So when our customers are doing a physical inventory count, they're able to, filter on maybe a specific location, or maybe it's a specific item number, and they're able to work with their data easily in Excel. So as opposed to printing out a piece of paper and having, rows and rows of data, and you're trying to figure out, okay, which row am I on? How can I easily see, what was the quantity calculated? What am I supposed to have? Especially in the digital age of trying to get away from printing everything. Being able to run your physical inventory count to Excel is super helpful. And then what we actually ended up doing for a couple clients is we did a little bit of customization to allow them to import this back into Business Central once they figured out their physical counts. So then we would update the journal and post it for them. So just kind of leveraging some of these tools that are already available, where get the data out of Business Central into Excel, make it easily consumable for our customers. Another example is we work with a boat manufacturer, and so they have to print out on this like pre-printed stock a certificate of origin. So, if you're thinking about maybe even like check stock or things like that, I haven't personally done a check in Excel. That seems a little bit scary to me, but being able to print, some piece of paper that is heavily formatted, it needs to be in an exact location. We have quite a bit of control with Excel. So what we did is we designed an Excel report, and then they have different tabs based on the different formats that they need to print. And so it's very easy for us to customize this and make our text boxes like the exact location that it needs to be to print. So while Excel reports are advertised as you don't need to print them, it's kind of nice to have Excel that is a little bit more user-friendly, getting down to very precise locations than, say, working with a Word report. And then another example that we used for a client, so they had like they have this whole custom item specification table where it's just kind of tracking a bunch of information about their products. So we created like a log table or like an archive table, and we are tracking, anytime that this data has changed. And then what we did was in Excel, we basically use as the data set the archive table, and then we conditionally formatted the columns. So if a value has changed, it would highlight it so you could easily see, like it draws your attention that this value has changed. So again, just kind of leveraging some of that built-in functionality within Excel. It's always like pretty difficult to like go through the change log and try to figure out, okay, what exactly changed. So leveraging something like Excel with the conditional formatting has worked out really nice for our customers. So let's start out talking about how easy it is to create an Excel layout. There's 4 easy steps that we're going to go through today. So the steps are, you're going to first get an Excel workbook, which has your data contract. We will then lay out our data as we wish using Excel features. You will then import your layout file back into Business Central and test the layout. So these are the 4 steps that will really get you on the ground running working with Excel report layouts. So step 1, we're going to get our Excel workbook with the data contract. So in Business Central, you would go to the Tell Me and search for the report that you would want to use. So we're going to talk about the inventory order details. You'll get the request page, and what you're going to do is you're going to click Send To. What this does is it opens up an option. We'll click Microsoft Excel document, data only. So this is going to run the report and send it to Excel. When you open Excel, there is a tab called Data, and this is where all of the data will be exposed for you to see from the report. And this is your data contract. What this is all of the fields in the first row are tying back to Business Central. So these are the names of the columns from the report data set. So we don't want to go and like change these names because that is what ties it back to Business Central. A few other things to know about your data contract. This is technically stored inside of a data table. So this table needs to have the name data, and your data contract needs to have at least 1 column. It can only include columns that are in the report data set. So what I like to say is don't really go touching this whole data sheet because this is, again, the data contract. If you need to make changes, let's say you have a developer and they added another column to the data set for you, you can like add that. But for the most part, I would say don't don't touch the data contract. And then one other thing is that your data contract must start in the first cell, so A1 of the data sheet. So if people were to start just using this data sheet to try and create a layout and we're inserting like rows or columns, that would probably be pretty detrimental to actually getting the data from Business Central. So just, I would say, don't touch the data contract. And then like I was saying, if a developer adds a new column to the report data set, like you can add it in row 1, like it'll just automatically pick up and publish the data. So another thing that we see inside of Excel is our system Excel sheets. These are typically hidden by default just because, like, as an end user, you probably don't need to see all of the behind the scenes magic that's happening. So you can see here that I have unhidden all of the system data sheets. So we have not only our data tab, we have some report data, metadata, caption data, the aggregated metadata, and the translation data. I would say that the most important is the aggregated metadata. So this has technically 4 different tables within it. So we have the report AL metadata, and this is kind of giving you information about, you know, the report that was ran to create this Excel report layout. So you can see which app is housing the data. So this is from the base application. It's technically a report 708 for the inventory order details. What's kind of cool is we have these about this report title and about this report text. These are ways to give users more information about the report that they're working with and even the report help link. This second table is your request metadata. So this is what you would use to, especially when if you're creating like a refreshable report, this is how you know when you're running a report, how to connect back to Business Central. So you'll have your tenant entra ID, you'll have like your environment name, your environment type, you've got your company ID as well as the company name, the date that it was ran, and then we have this nice UTC offset. So especially if you're working with a report with dates and times and things of that nature, it's nice to have that to do calculations. We can also see what was the layout that we used. So if we are using an existing Excel report layout from Business Central, we can see which one are we modifying. This third table is the request page filters. So if there were filters set when we were running the report, as well as this last table is the report captions. So you can kind of see what type of filters and captions were being used. So then if we talk a little bit about some of these other system tables, so we have the translation data, which uses the user's language to translate strings that don't exist as captions in the report object. So especially if you're working in, like a multi-language environment, being able to translate those captions so they're not hard-coded based on what user's language is being used to run the report. This is helpful, as well as the caption data table. So these are the columns that are included in the data set, and then you would be able to map these as the labels in the report. So we can use the values from the caption key to use them in the report layout. So you can see here, it's the caption and then the value if I was running the report, let's say in French. So being able to make our reports multilingual and not have to worry about, which report layout are we using, everything can be accessed at runtime. So then step 2, after you have your data in Excel, is to lay out your data as you wish using Excel features. So one of the nice things that Microsoft has done for us is they have created these name formulas for us to reuse. So if you go to formulas and then name manager, you can see all these different names that they've created with X lookups. So this is an easy way to get information from, especially the aggregated metadata. So things like using the company ID, environment name, tenant entry ID. Rather than having to type out the whole XLOOKUP, we can just use these named functions, and they'll be able to easily return the data for you. So when we're talking about different things that we can use within Excel, being able to group and subtotal our data very easily with a click of a button is really nice. We're able to use some of these features like conditional formatting, removing duplicates, looking at different ways of analyzing our data. So especially if we're able to now use like Copilot within Excel. So, asking Copilot to help us analyze the data that we're given from Business Central, maybe look at some different trends in our data, as well as leveraging, KPIs, doing even some forecasting, so some what if analysis. That's actually pretty cool to be able to take our data from Business Central and then just start doing some of this post-processing within Excel. So I think really what it comes down to is finding the people in your organization who say that they know Excel and telling them to prove it. So I think back in the day, everybody had, oh, I'm proficient in Excel on my resume. So going back and finding those people and saying, okay, here's your opportunity to shine. Show us, some of the cool stuff that you can do with Excel. Another neat feature I would say within Business Central is having OneDrive set up. So an administrator would search for the OneDrive setup inside Business Central and walk through this wizard to set up OneDrive with Business Central. So then essentially when you run your Excel reports, rather than downloading it to, the user's computer, it's all within the cloud in a shared location. So if we're talking about walking through the wizard, one caveat is just making sure that your pop-ups are not blocked, and you'll just want to review external sharing settings with users in SharePoint. And so this allows you to use, different features of OneDrive. So if we're talking about comments, being able to manage then protection of data, things like that. So this would be within OneDrive. Otherwise, if you are looking into things like the refreshable reports, those sometimes are even suited for just downloading to users' systems so they can run the report and pull that data from Business Central. So step 3, we're going to import our layout file back into Business Central. So once we've designed our layout, gotten a bunch of our formulas working, created some pivot tables, we want to upload this back into Business Central so other users can run the report and leverage what we are using. So from the report layout screen, you would click new layout. So either from the actions, or you can go to the specific report that you're working with and click new layout. And when you create the new layout, you just need to give it a name and description. Make sure that you change the format option to Excel, and then you will be prompted to, you can set as well, like if you want the default option for creating data, or if you want the data split up into like multiple data sheets. So being able to leverage some of that advanced processing of that data from Business Central. So when we upload our Excel layout back into Business Central, this is kind of some of the stuff that happens on the back end. So when you're importing your layout, you want to make sure that your Excel file is not password protected, because Business Central is going to need to be able to access the data sheet. So just making sure Business Central have access. It will also ensure that that data worksheet exists. So if that data worksheet doesn't exist or the naming is kind of off, it will fail on the upload. The other thing is that on the back end, it should be deleting the data that is present in the data worksheet. So I would say, just from experience of working with Excel report layouts, sometimes it gets kind of confused, I think, when it's trying to do all this processing when you upload a layout. So a lot of times I'll get to a point where everything's working as I expected. I have everything laid out. I might delete the data, not delete like the entire data contract, but just the rows of data and then import it. So it's one less step that I'm relying on Business Central to do as I'm uploading the Excel layout. I think there's just a lot of things going on in the background, and I've seen where it's gotten stuck. And then another thing that's happening on the back end is that the columns are validated as part of the data contract. So if somebody added a new column and it doesn't actually exist, it'll throw an error, or it doesn't, I guess, care so much if the columns are missing. So it's really just making sure there's not something there that shouldn't be. So then what you will need to do is test your layout. So from the report layout screen, you would select your layout. So you can see here, I would have it selected for the Excel layout, and then you would run it. So you can just click Run Report, and then if your organization had configured OneDrive, the workbook is then like downloaded to OneDrive and opened in your browser. Otherwise, the workbook is downloaded to your device. So then what happens on the server when you're running a report with an Excel layout? So it first will generate the data set. It'll apply the filters and options from the request page. It will then load the Excel layout file and insert the data into the data contract. So like I said, that's, I think, sometimes the trickiest part is knowing, when it's loading that data, making sure that everything maps correctly. And then it provides that merged Excel workbook to the user for download or to view in Excel online. So those are the four main, I guess, steps of working with Excel layouts. So now we're going to take it to the next level and talk about refreshable Excel report layouts. So refreshable Excel report layouts are where the report serves as a connection back to Business Central by calling Business Central APIs within Excel using Power Query. So Business Central will give us the environment information as part of that aggregated metadata sheet. And then from Excel, we can create a report layout and use the OData connection to BC to refresh the data. So when we're talking about connecting back to Business Central, we are using an API. So APIs have this structure. They all start with api.businesscentral.dynamics.com. We're going to use the 2.0 version of APIs. You will then need your tenant ID, which we can find on the aggregated metadata sheet. So that would be the tenant Entra ID. Then we need the environment name. So in the screenshot, it was Sandbox 25. Then it'll be API, and then the API like publisher and the API group, if this is like a custom API or it's not from like the base app. Our queries or our APIs will have in the API definition. So this is an example of a query. We have the API publisher of Contoso and the API group of app1. Then technically you would need the API version, but I think typically now we're all using 2.0. So we are going to build out this API string to connect back to Business Central. So from Excel, we would first click on data. then we would click on Get Data from other sources and then from the OData feed. So then it'll open up the Power Query Editor. And so we're just going to put that API string in here. So again, it's the api.businesscentral.dynamics.com. We're going to use the version 2.0, the environment name, and then when we load that up, it will show us kind of like the APIs that are available from the base app. So once it's trying to connect, obviously it's going to kind of need some authentication because it doesn't really know who you are at this point. So you'll get a pop-up to connect, and you're going to want to click organizational account and sign in. So this is basically just a way for you to get that data loaded and be able to start working with it. Once you have this set up, and let's say it's in like a client environment, it should just, like open with their credentials. I think typically it'll have like a prompt at the top that to like enable content. But if you set it up with the organizational account, you should be okay. So once you have signed in, you can now see all of the base APIs that are available, and we're going to click load. So this will load it to the Power Query Editor within Excel. And then just making sure, sometimes it'll like reprompt you, like how are you connecting? So set it for that organizational level. So just making sure that the correct people are able to access the data within Business Central. So then once we've loaded the APIs into Power Query, we need to kind of make this refreshable Excel report like work with the data that's part of the Excel spreadsheet. Because when we run Excel report from Business Central, it's going to give us all of the environment information that we need to connect back to Business Central. So it makes it really easy if you're switching between, say, like a sandbox and production, that you can easily set up the connection details. So you can see here that I'm getting the environment name from the report request environment name. So these are all those from that aggregated metadata sheet. So I'm getting the environment name. I'm also getting the company ID. At one point, there were curly brackets within the company ID. So just doing some data cleanup, getting our tenant. Then you can see I'm building out the source of the API data. So we have the base URL, then I'm putting in the tenant ID, the environment name. You can see here that my API publisher was my blog for BC Dev Notebook, and the API group was sales. And then I'm going to use the specific company that I ran the Excel report with, and then run my actual API. So this was a custom API for sales order item categories. And then we can start manipulating that data within Excel and within Power Query. So what you can see then is like when you like open Excel, it'll actually refresh the data because we are pulling it from Business Central. So let's say we need to know what's shipping today. You can open Excel, you can refresh the data, and it'll pull that data in for you. Let's see. I guess, are there any questions at this point about refreshable Excel reports?
Yeah, I've got two questions, and I think one question is already answered that you explained here from, would you mind showing again how you got environment variables to be dynamic?
Yep.
That was around, I think, was a couple of slides ago.
So here's an example of an Excel report. So again, using the aggregated metadata sheet, we have all this like environment information. So we have our tenant ID, we have an environment name, company ID right here. So then when I load Power Query, and let me just drag this over. If I go into the advanced editor, I created essentially variables that are looking at that report request environment name, the tenant entra ID, and the company ID. So when you can step through the steps, you can see like that it's pulling this from this sheet. So kind of building out variables that we're able to easily reuse within our Excel report.
Okay, yeah, nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
The second question is from Zach, is from if a user permission setup in BC does not allow read on a table used in the Excel report, will the load fail for that particular user?
That is a great question because that user is connecting via an API. So I think you would have to have permissions like with that table. That's something I haven't necessarily dove into too much. I can definitely though look into that and share like on LinkedIn or something once we dive into that further.
Yeah, and then two questions came on also. How we can secure these details from users? So probably the Power Query environment setup, etc.
Yeah, so that is a great question because this does come like out of the box when you run a report. I would say I don't necessarily know that there's a way to secure it. You could, again, like rehide all of these sheets once you're done working with them. I think it just gives them the information though back to Business Central and how it connects. So even if you had just a normal Excel report layout, you would still have all of this behind the scenes data as well.
Yeah. Then the next question, when building the data query URL, do you actually need to use the publisher name, API group, and the version parts?
That would only be if you're connecting to like a custom API. Otherwise, if you are like this is using the out of the box sales orders API. So you can see like I don't have then like the publisher and the API group. So out of the box ones, no, you don't need a publisher and the API group. It would just be for like custom APIs where it's kind of identifying where else to find those.
Yeah. And then some last remark from one is users can unhide the sheets.
Yes, they can.
Yeah.
I don't know a way to lock it down so they can't unhide it because remember we have to like have it unlock, like it can't be password protected or anything when we upload it into Business Central.
Then another one is came and I'm a little bit struggle with my screen. Yeah. Another question, to protect any sheet or data, what if we password protect that particular sheet that users should not access? Give it a password that only you or the admin would know and ship the layout. Let me know if this works.
I don't think that would work because when well, maybe you could, no, because this data still needs to be accessed by Business Central when it's uploaded. So I guess the only way that you could technically get around it by if you were using this as a refreshable Excel report, so you wouldn't necessarily need to have it uploaded like back into Business Central. So it would kind of just live, let's say, on your OneDrive or on your computer that you could password protect it at that point. It's just if you were trying to upload it into Business Central, so you kind of have it stored and accessible for users, you wouldn't be able to have it password protected.
Yeah, indeed. So indeed, protecting also the sheets won't help because Business Central needs to access that data.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. So out of the box Excel reports. So if you were running it from Business Central, running it as the layout, it needs to be able to update, the aggregated metadata, like all of this essentially. So the data sheet as well. If it was just living somewhere externally, so we're using the refreshable access, so we're not really repopulating this data sheet where you're now pulling the data from Business Central into a query using Power Query, I could see where then you could password protect things. So especially if you are using the report to say grabbing all this stuff that's shipping today, and so you just want a user to open this Excel sheet as opposed to having to log into Business Central and run the report. So they're just pulling the data through the APIs. I could see where it could, be password protected at that point.
Yeah, indeed. Those were the questions that there.
Okay, perfect. So then I guess just a recap of what we've gone through today. So we were able to create an Excel layout in 4 easy steps. So you get your Excel workbook with the data contract. You lay out your data as you wish using Excel features. You would then import your layout file back into Business Central and test the layout. And then we also talked about the refreshable aspect. Some key takeaways, I think, about using this newer functionality is that we're using some of that built-in functionality of Business Central. So you can start with any report data set that already exists within Business Central. You can then easily export your report data set to Excel. It's very simple and easy to use. There's no code required. Obviously, when you start creating custom APIs or custom report data sets, that's where it gets really fun and interesting, being able to build out exactly the data that you need access to, but being able to leverage Excel's data analytical capabilities for that data-driven reporting experience is really where this shines, that we're able to use all of these different capabilities to enhance our reporting capabilities. So my call to action for you is start small. So maybe add a new sheet to an existing Excel report layout. Is there a different way that you could display the data, create a new data sheet? Maybe it's a new pivot table, maybe it's conditionally formatting or grouping. Where are you opening in Excel? So, from Business Central, what pages are users opening in Excel and then doing a bunch of post-processing? Are they going and summing things? Are they grouping things? If you're doing that and you're doing it consistently, like every month I open the item ledger entries in a list page and then I'm grouping and doing sums, like create an Excel report layout. All you have to do then is run it and it already groups and calculates things for you. So kind of looking at what processes are we already using Excel for? Are we getting data from Business Central and doing something in Excel? That's really where you can start out. And then, can you reuse it? So like I said, building an Excel report layout on an existing data set. A lot of the report data sets have a lot of the information that you already need from a list page. So kind of just using what's already there as opposed to trying to build something completely custom. So I think then I wanted to review some of my suggested resources. So I have on my blog, bcdevnotebook.com. If you search for Excel, I have a couple different blogs. This QR code is for the Refreshable Excel report specifically. And then also if you go to aka.ms/bcexcel, there are a ton of resources on how to work with Excel report layouts in Business Central. And so then I just wanted to say thank you for attending or watching the recording. My name is Tonya Bricco-Meske. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow my blog or my cats, this is how you can get in contact with me. So thank you, Bert, for hosting today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tanya. And it's really easy to see from how you can do it with Excel. With RDLC reporting, you need an experienced developer, and now with Excel, you get the power. And really great to see it. And really thanks on behalf of the Areopa webinar. Also, from watching this, this, what I said before, this recording will be posted also on our YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, please do. And if you suggest some sessions or you want to be a speaker, email us on the Areopa webinar. So thanks a lot and have a great day or evening, and see you to the next time on our Areopa